For those who didn't show up to the last meeting, my name's John Bars. I'm actually the host of the Grid Nashville Music City group here in Nashville. And the whole purpose of this is to teach you how to become a real estate investor. There are some other groups out there that, they're selling coaching or they're selling tapes or books, or I'm showing my age saying tapes, but books, things like that. And they kind of give you the A through M of investing. And then I'll teach you the last part of it if you pay me, some money every month. So that's not what Grid's all about. Grid, we're going to give you A to the Z of everything. We're going to teach you anything you want to know about real estate investing. I don't know everything, so I bring subject matter experts like this. And Matt Stell's going to be on here, the Matt Stell. He's going to be on here soon talking about his journey as a real estate investor and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and get started today. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about creative financing. Traditional way of real estate investing is you got 20% down, and you go and buy a house to rent out, and it cash flows a few $100s a month, maybe more, and you carry on. But what if you don't have that 20% down? What if you're just getting started? I hear a lot of people, I'm a real estate agent and a mortgage lender, the biggest excuse I hear all the time is, I don't have the money to get started. Today, we're going to dispel all that, and you can do it. This is Miss Rosemary Calcese. I have known her for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. She is an attorney, a phenomenal attorney, and she also owns Transformation Title, which is hands down one of the best title companies I've ever had the pleasure of working with. She also owns a law firm, Calcese and Associates, mm-hmm. And she keeps everyone in Clarksville out of jail with their contracts and things like that. So we love that because none of us look good in orange except the Matt Stell there. But anyway, so we're going to be talking about that today. This is going to be more of a conversation. If you have any questions at all, please just fire them off, okay? Don't let me blaze past your question and move on because we're going to be talking about a few different things today. So please just raise your hand, say, hey, John, hey, Rosemary, and then shoot your question out. If you have a particular deal in mind that you're working through or looking at right now, shoot that out. Let us all work through it because that's what it's all about here is networking. And I promise you, if I haven't made the mistake, somebody else here has, and we'll guide you the right way. So, Rosemary, would you do us a favor and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, Rosemary Calcese. I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in Tennessee, Texas, and Alabama. I've been doing real estate law in some form or fashion for just under 16 years. All I know how to do is read deeds and contracts, so I'm one of the most unthrilling people you'll ever meet in your life. And I love real estate, and I've worked everything from dirt development to a flip to multifamily. I've closed anything from $500 million transaction in one deal to $20,000. So I work the full spectrum, and I treat everybody the same. That's the big thing with Transformation Title is no matter what your deal is, how big, how small, everyone's treated the same. We deliver the same service. So I love teaching. I love helping people. I grew up in a trailer park and am not only the first one to go to college, but definitely the first one to go to law school. So I learned a lot in my trailer park and came a long way. So I love to give back to people. If you're hungry, you can call me and I will feed you all the real estate knowledge you need. But I do believe in lifting people up. So, and everyone around me generally believes the same. So I love this program and that there's no financial buy-in because it's just good people coming together to do good things.
Absolutely.
All right. Is there somebody answering the questions if they ask them? Do we know?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
We'll figure that out on the next meeting.
All right. Bethany?
Yeah, Bethy, if you could watch the live feed.
Thanks, babe.
When we're talking about creative financing, I already kind of talked about, if you want to start getting into flipping, I'm a hard money lender. So typically what we ask for is 20% down of the purchase price, and then we'll finance 100% of the construction costs. But that 20% can be limiting for some folks. So there's other options like subject tos, lease options, owner financing, a lot of different ways to get to the exact same goal in the beginning when you're first starting. But there's a lot of pitfalls if you don't do these things right, because it's very contract heavy, and none of us are lawyers except you. So if I was looking at a property and we're talking about a subject to deal, can you tell us a little bit about what subject to means?
Yeah.
And some of the benefits and downfalls and things to watch out for with that?
Yeah. So a subject to means that you are going to purchase the property via a deed conveyance. So you're going to own possession of the property, but you are going to purchase it subject to the existing mortgage. So existing mortgage will not be satisfied, and it's going to be an exception on your title insurance. So the loan stays in the current owner's name, but you take over control of the physical house. And there are a lot of pros and a lot of cons to subject tos, but they're really good for short term. If you need to get into the house and it's got a lot of equity, there's a lot of really great times you can use them, and there's some that it's not a good idea.
So if you were, now correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
if I say something dumb, but I probably will. So we have a few of those going on right now in Clarksville. Now, if you're just a regular seller, you've owned your house for 15 years, you're not in any distress with the house, you just want to sell it, retire, maybe you want to downsize or move to somewhere else. Subject to may not be the way to go on that, because you have time to sell it through conventional means. You're not really trying to give away your equity or things like that. Mm-hmm. But if you purchased your house in the last 3 years and you have one of those 2.9 or 3.1 interest rates, and it's a VA loan or an FHA loan, which those are assumable in most cases, and let's say you're getting transferred and you need to move quick. You don't have time for the house to sit on the market. You don't really have a whole lot of equity in it, so there may not be a lot of play there. A subject to where another VA buyer comes in and says, hey, I'll just take over your, I'll do a subject to, I get the house, I'll just make the mortgage payments for you, but it's going to stay in your name. And then later on, when you build up some equity or when financial situation changes, we can do a conventional loan and then buy it from you outright. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's one scenario.
Okay.
For sure.
What I come across a lot with the conversations that happen more often when around subject twos in the world of a realtor, like foreclosures and things like that. That's a great way to stave off foreclosure. If you're having some financial difficulties and maybe you've gotten a couple payments behind and you're in a pre-foreclosure status, somebody, a real estate investor might come in, Matt might come in and say, hey, I'll catch your mortgage up for you. And then I'm going to take over the payments. You guys are going to have to find somewhere else to live, typically. But this will save your credit. We're going to catch up the mortgage. We're going to start making the payments. You give me the login or however you want to work that out. And then we're either going to rent it out or Matt might move in there himself in there. What are some of the pitfalls with that, though? Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that can get you in trouble with that?
So the main one is we have something in Tennessee called the Tennessee Foreclosure Protection Act, and that's the controlling law for those types of transactions and a little bit more. But essentially what it says is that you cannot always enter into an agreement with somebody that's distressed. And it can give off the appearance that you've taken advantage of somebody that's in a distressed position. If somebody is in financial distress and they're facing to lose their house, they're $140,000 behind, they have nowhere to go, that gives off the appearance that somebody's distressed and maybe wouldn't enter into the contract that they did with you given a new scenario. And so the way that Tennessee looks at that is it could be a situation where it looks like that you went after them and sought to take advantage of somebody.
Predatory.
And it's a predatory type situation. Us nerd people, 2 years ago, the Tennessee Supreme Court actually took that action and overturned 2 deeds, which never happens because constitutionally, real property is a personal choice. And the government and state stays very far away from interfering with your rights to own property. Well, what they did is they interfered with it and said, contractually, it was wrong and you defrauded somebody, so we're going to give the house back to the person. The investor had had it for 2 years. He lost all the equity. He lost all the improvements he put into it, and they awarded it back to the original owner.
Oh, wow.
So when that happened, everyone really in our world took very serious caution. And if you're a real estate lawyer, I've studied what that act says. And when I do a subject to transaction, I make sure that we're in adherence with every single element of it. Before that, we used to be able to do them a little bit more casually than when those deeds were overturned. That kind of changed our landscape.
So where's that line versus predatory versus helping them save their credit and finding them a new house? I mean, where's that line, or how do you
Proper disclosure.
disclosures like crazy? Okay.
My subject to package that I've drafted has probably 12 disclosures in it.
Okay.
And we want the seller to initial next to the disclosure. I want to underline it for them. At no time was there any confusion about what this deal meant to you?
Okay.
Right.
So you definitely wouldn't have somebody download some legal forms off the internet and try to do a subject to on their own.
No, that's not a good idea.
Okay.
No,
All
we
right.
don't love that.
So there's a plug. Call Rosemary if you want to do a subject to stay out of jail, or at least keep your money. I would hate to lose a property 2 years and go through all that.
It was brutal.
That sounds brutal.
Yeah, especially to be upheld at such a high court for us attorney. I mean, it's just very.
Is that going any further? Is it being challenged higher, or is that's it?
That's the law.
Okay, that's the law. Okay. So the next kind of, anybody have any questions about subject twos? Anything? Nothing? All right. Everybody in the back? No? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Is that a way for people to kind of start squatting? I know that might be like
For the sellers to squat?
yeah, or for
The buyer?
yeah, that's doing the stuff. I'm just saying, because I know a situation in the neighborhood that's been getting a lot of chatter, so. I'm trying to figure out how they.
If you're doing a subject to, you're typically signing contracts and if you've done it right, everybody is on the same page. Everybody has read the same things. Everybody understands the deal that's being made. And there's positives and negatives for both parties, to be honest with you. I mean, the person initiating the subject to is taking a big risk that you're going to honor because the deed stays in the seller's name, correct? The original owner?
Buyers.
That goes in the buyer's name.
Yeah, deed transfers.
There is a deed transfer. Okay. Because I have, we're live, so I know real estate investors who are not making it official in the tax record, and they're just basically having a contract signed and taking over. You wouldn't recommend that.
No, because I have no concrete security, and I can't force you to sell your property. That's illegal.
Okay.
And I can't alienate your property either. That's also illegal.
Okay.
So if I start making your mortgage payments for you, and we have a contract that you will sell it, I can go after you for breach of contract. But if I don't succeed on that, if something changed, such as this is the most common that's happened in those scenarios, is it's an option to purchase. So we enter into an agreement that says, I have an option to purchase your property, and during that time frame, I'm going to pay your mortgage, but you are going to allow me to buy this property in 6 months. Okay, we all sign it. There's two issues generally on those. One, in an option contract, you must have an option fee. And if you don't, it doesn't work.
Okay.
Legally. So there's been a couple incidences where people get out of them because there's no option fee. The second one is if we say, I'm going to sell you the property for $330,000 because that's what's the fair deal. And in 6 months, the market tanks. And I say, well, market tanked, I'm not paying you $330 now, it's worth $290. Well, now you're in breach.
Okay.
Because now you have to sell it. I'm going to force your hand at it. So running deals like that is just you can do it, but you run a high risk as the investor because you're out equity or you're out cash. But what's my security? Because if I breach or you breach, now I'm in a legal action and I've got money tied up. So how am I going to untie that money?
Costing me more money for the legal action.
So how am I going to untie the money, not spend 10 grand on a legal action? Meanwhile, I still got a house sitting on the market that I can't get off my books.
Okay.
That just doesn't work in our investor world. Time is money. Time is of the essence. 2 weeks can cost us 40 grand. And so if somebody says, well, sue me. Okay, great. So now we're in 6 months later and time's a ticking on it.
So you're talking about the purchase option. So what is the difference then between a subject to and a lease option? Are they interchangeable?
No, subject to, I take control of the deed. So
Okay.
it's a conveyance.
Okay.
So I own the property, but you're liable for the mortgage.
Okay. And a lease option, I'm basically renting the house from you. Deed stays in the seller's name. Everything stays. It's just I'm leasing it with an option to buy at the end of the lease term. Okay. Now, when it comes to subject twos, would you notify the lender?
No.
No. Okay. Now, you don't notify the lender, but the lender finds out.
Potentially, yes.
So if they find out, they may have a clause in the mortgage where they can accelerate that mortgage and say, hey, the full balance is due immediately. That's another risk that you run with doing a subject to.
Yep. It's called the due on sale clause,
Yeah.
and it's in every deed of trust.
Okay. So we'd have to convey to the sellers, everybody needs to be on the same page that the lender doesn't need to know what's going on here. This is between us, because as soon as you notify that lender, they may
Call it due.
call it due, and then you're in a lot more of a pickle than you were before.
Yeah, and your seller's security is if the lender calls it due, then you now own the property, so you got to pay it. Some people will argue to say, well, but the note's not in my name, so technically I don't owe the money, but the collateral is in the name.
Yeah, they're going to take your collateral.
So if you don't think the Bank of America is going to seize your collateral,
Yeah.
they will.
Okay. All right. So subject to is a good tool to have in the toolbox, but not one you want to pull out for every deal.
The best scenario, the best situation that subject twos work and are the most lucrative is if you find distressed property that needs to get flipped, but you can flip it within 12 weeks. Take it sub two and save your money on the purchase, save your money on title, save all that cash. If you close with us and you're doing a flip, we have like flipper deals, meaning I don't charge any fees on the front side because we save that for the back side. So we try to keep it as lean as possible on the sub two transaction. Then in 12 weeks, you flip that bad boy, you satisfy the loan, and you just added $80,000 worth of value, and you close and cash out of it. That's the best vehicle it's used for.
So if you don't have the 20% down in the beginning, that's a good tool.
Yep.
Then once you sell the first one, you'll have the 20% down for the next one.
Right.
And now you can just keep rolling it and end up 10x in your money.
Yep.
All right. So lease options. Mm-hmm. We're working one right now where the sellers bought a house 2 years ago for $410. Marriage is breaking up. They want to sell the house, but they don't have any equity after 2 years because most of their payment's going to interest. So we found somebody to do a lease option, a 5-year lease option, and they're going to basically just take over the mortgage, pay, and then take over the HOA, everything. But at the end of the 5 years, they're going to agree to exercise that option and buy it for whatever the balance of the mortgage is at that time, 5 years from now. What do you think about those? What are some of the pitfalls on that? You see any downside to those kind of things?
I think when you do, the thing that jumps out to me on that is the term. 5 years is just a long time to have somebody in a residential property, and the amount of wear and tear on that house is generally extensive. If they're not taking care of it, they could add value. It's a 50-50 shot.
Sure.
5 years is a long time. I'd probably shorten that time if I could, if that's an option. But the downside is they change their mind and they find a loophole out of the option contract and diminish value in the house. And now the landlord has to fix the house and put it back on the market. It's just the same tenant-landlord relationship that we all have. And sometimes it's great, and then other times you're like, wow, what did you do in here? This is amazing. So you just kind of run that risk.
Sure. Okay. That would so you'd want to vet the buyer a lot more stringently than you would for most other deals.
Yeah, and I would, in that one, this is just my personal strategy, but in those type of deals, I would prefer, instead of a lease option, to do owner finance. And I will owner finance you the house. I'm going to charge you interest. I'm going to take a second lien on the house, and I'm going to pocket the interest. And so then I have some security over the 5 years, and I'm going to make some money over it too.
Okay.
And I also have a lien on the property. So if you try to do anything stupid, then I'm going to be stupid too. And
Drop the hammer.
Yeah.
Okay, I will want to talk to you about that more after this. But I do have a great lease option contract. It just happens to have Rosemary Calcese and Associates under it. So yeah, I do have that. Been using that thing like crazy.
Matt, get your friend.
Yeah, get me under control. So if the seller ends up defaulting on either one of these, lease option or even with a subject to, if the seller wants to back out at any time, if this contract isn't, I mean, if they just decide, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to take my property back. That sounds like that would be a nightmare of a situation right there. And so how can somebody who's entering into one of these as the buyer, how can they best protect themselves? I mean, obviously having a bulletproof contract as much as bulletproof as they can be. But what are some of the what's some of the verbiage in those contracts that you'd like to see to make sure that they're protected?
On the sub 2 side, disclosures, proper payments, no late payments, no defaulted payments, some what I call an end period. So you don't want to keep their loan in their name for an extensive period of time. There needs to be an end to that. And that's where the Foreclosure Protection Act talks a little bit about. You get into some SEC rules with lending. If you have the loan, but I'm paying the loan, is there like a little bit of an issue, legal issue there? Maybe. So you just don't want to hold them long term. So I always tell investors, let's have an end to this. What is the end? Is it 1 year? Is it 2? Like what is the end? Because that way if somebody calls it, you can say, whoa, I've paid the mortgage. I've improved the property. I planned and disclosed that I was going to refinance the property in 22 months, which I still plan to do. I've done all the things I was supposed to. I also give all the proper disclosures. Then they really don't have a basis to call the default on a sub 2. I did just have a deed overturned. I represented the seller on the sub 2 side and had a deed overturned. That investor held that sub 2 for 10 years in a sub 2 position, and it was still in the seller's name, who happened to be an E3 in the Army when he did it. Now he has a family, he's out, he's in Texas, applied for a loan, and what do you know, it's still in his name.
So his DTI is all messed up.
That doesn't look good on the investor. Because I'm like, okay, so what was your long-term plan?
Just keep it like that until the note was paid off?
Yeah, but he had also had 6 late payments on the mortgage. And
so it's dinging his credit too.
yeah, 2 of them dinged his credit, and then the other 4 were only like 6 or 7 days late. But between the late payments, the extensive hold time, the no plan of action to remove the debt from the original buyer, that doesn't look right. That looks like you're taking advantage of somebody. And so I had the deed overturned for that one.
Oh, nice. Okay, so it worked out for the seller.
For the seller, it worked out. For the investor, I think he lost $115,000.
Okay, so a bad day for him.
Bad day for him.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the length of the subject to period, what's your recommendation? How long would you say is kind of like the max? What's on your comfort
I don't like
level?
anything more than 24 months,
Okay,
and I really recommend 6 months. I know they're short-term vehicles, but
It's not meant to be a long-term
it's
play.
not meant to be. But with anything in real estate, it's your risk orientation. So you know the seller, we know the buyer. You get comfortable in these deals, and remember, I'm the most risk adverse, so I'm going to give you what the most risk adverse advice would be, and then you guys are business people, and then you take that and make a determination of what's comfortable for you. And you may have such a comfort with the seller that you don't want to live by my rule, and that's fine. And that's at your discretion.
That doesn't sound like a good plan.
I mean,
Because last thing I want to hear is, I told you, John. I told you so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens.
Now, I know you're not an accountant, but what are some of the tax implications, if you feel comfortable speaking on that, with subject to? Does the seller get any tax benefits from doing it this way, or does the buyer end up getting all the tax benefits?
The buyer gets all the tax benefits.
We are going to have a CPA on here who is a real estate investing guru, and we're going to talk about all of that. Eric, he was very excited about that. He's I'm going to send in questions beforehand. I think that'd be pretty good. But so you're doing the subject to, you do it the right way, and you do a deed transfer and all that. The buyer's obviously now got all that in his name, his or her name, and they're getting the tax benefits of owning the property. And you're just you're completely detached from that property at this point until the full sale goes through.
And even then, you don't even know it.
Okay, so then it's just, all right, so good deal.
We do all the paperwork up front, so you never have to contact the seller again. So you have all your authorizations up front for loan portal accesses and limited powers of attorney. I do all of that stuff on the front end. And so hopefully, after the closing, you and the seller don't ever interact again.
That's it. So it's just they'll have access to the online portal with the mortgage company. They'll take care of it. Now, with subject to and with lease options, typically the buyer is responsible for all repairs, anything that go HOA dues, everything, correct? They're not going to be calling up the seller at any point saying, hey, the HVAC went out, I need a new
Shouldn't
HVAC.
be.
Okay, so, but you need to have that clearly documented in the contracts as well, right?
In the lease option, you definitely need it in there. In the sub 2, they don't have any right to do that.
Because the deed's been transferred over, okay. So the lease options, I mean, it's almost like a commercial triple net lease where you're just, this is yours, you do with it what you want to do. Don't diminish the value, you can add value. Anything breaks, it's on you with a lease option. Okay. But now, if they don't exercise, let's say they do have to put an HVAC system in there, that's $10,000 they got to put in there. If they don't exercise the lease option, is there any way to come back on the sellers and say, hey, you owe me that money? Or is it all based on the contract you have?
Who am I representing? The buyer or the seller?
That was a very lawyer answer. Got it, okay.
My answer will change.
Your answer will change. Okay, so you're representing the seller.
Okay, so I have a case right now where I represent the seller. They did a lease option to purchase. The buyer improved the property with a gazebo, with new countertops, and a bunch of other stuff, and then couldn't close. And the term is up on the lease option. Nobody said you should improve that property.
So they're just out that money.
They are out that money.
And they're screaming up and down they want their
You
money.
had no rights to adjust my fee simple property. It doesn't say in there that you can make modifications to get a refund.
Okay.
It says you can make modifications and improvements, but it doesn't say that you get a refund on that.
All right.
So they're out
Fair.
$45,000 or something like that. They want to come get the gazebo. No, sir. That thing is on a concrete slab.
It's a
Part of the property.
part of the property now.
Yeah.
All right. So now you're representing the buyer.
Buyer, I would say you made promises to me that if I improved the property, that I would be the beneficiary of the value. And now you're removing my opportunity to be the beneficiary of the value. And so I would try to make an argument that if they didn't do something in the contract, they somehow defaulted. Usually you can find something that they've done and try to get something back.
Yeah, they're just settling out. And
Like the
offering something.
gazebo, I would say it's not bolted to the concrete. I can move it. What's to say I can't do that?
Okay.
And they would be like, okay, that's true. Okay.
This is why I have you on here right now.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Well,
All right. So the moral of the story is get a really good attorney who's going to make you as close to a bulletproof contract as possible and cover your bases.
Yeah.
So if somebody defaults on a lease option, let's say, because we've got the one where they're doing a 5-year lease option, but at year 2, they're like, our situation's changed. We're moving to Texas.
Yep.
We're out. Puts the seller in a pretty bad position at that point, because what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
How would you handle that?
You just got to wind down the lease. Because technically the buyer doesn't have any obligation to purchase. They just have the option.
They have the option. But are they with a lease option? Is that an obligation to pay like a rent option? Like you can't go after them for anything, like for the future rents that were in the. So it's just parting ways, vaya con Dios.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So something to be aware of, and on that.
To the benefit of the buyer, not the seller.
Sure, I
Because
can see that.
And if they're smart buyers, they're going to lock in a purchase price that's lower with no consideration of appreciation. So those buyers,
It's an equity play. Yeah.
It's an equity play. So for those buyers, I would say I'll pay you what the current value is, but not the value from 5 years from now. And I'm going to pay you all of the rent payments that I'm making over the 5 years are going to come off the principal amount of the mortgage. And so I'm going to do an adjustment of my purchase price at the 5 years. So if I entered into the contract to buy it for $300,000, I'll buy that minus all the principal payments that I've made over a 5-year term. And so I'm actually going to end up buying it for $240,000.
Yeah, we looked at the amortization schedule for the loan, and we have a definitive option date on there, and that's whatever the balance of the loan was at that time. That's what we made the purchase price option at.
But some people don't do that. They just say your option to purchase is $400,000, and the buyer signs it. And then they come in 3 years later and say, I think I've messed up.
You weren't making an equity play there.
And the seller's like, I don't care if you messed up or not, because now I've got more equity in the property and the value's gone up. So I'll just take your rent payments that you made. I'm going to flip it and sell it, because I don't have to do any allocation of your rent.
Okay.
So lots of negotiation and lease options.
This is good for us to know. So owner financing, another way of doing it. So, and you've had one of these or a couple of those. Just got to keep pointing Matt out. I'm sorry. So owner financing. I want to buy this property from you. I can't get financing right now. Maybe I've got too much going on and my DTI is messed up, but I can easily afford the house. What are some of the things that you would caution people about with owner financing, where I'm going directly to the owner, they are financing me buying this house?
Mm-hmm. The biggest one is you need to look at an official payoff and do a title search. Usually in owner finances, you don't always need a closing. Sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you do. But if you do one, or if you don't, no matter what, you need to do a hard title search to make sure you have a good idea of any liens on the property and what are the true payoffs. And so you have that pocketed. Never take a payoff from the owner. That's not a thing. We don't trust those. So we need to call and get the payoff as a third party. It needs to be official. In owner financing, in the deed of trust, we want to have a line in there that says that the owner is prohibited from collateralizing the property and taking any debt out on it in any other form or fashion.
Oh, no, why are you cautioning on that? I know the answer. I'm just, for everybody else, why would you caution that?
Because sometimes what people like to do is, I'll owner finance you my house on Main Street, and then I'm going to go buy one on 2nd Street, and I'm going to collateralize it with the equity on Main.
Take a HELOC out.
And I'm going to take a HELOC out after we closed, but I have a right to do that because technically I'm still the owner.
So during owner financing, we're not doing a deed transfer, not until the terms of that.
You can, yeah. I mean, you can do a deed transfer. If you do, then that's fine. But the note that's owed still has the ability to be collateralized.
Okay.
And so they can still say, well, John owes me $300,000, so I'll promise to pay you by virtue of that $300 note or $300,000 note.
So they could still use the house as collateral for whatever they wanted to do.
Potentially. And so we just want to write in there to be very clear that there's no opportunity to side saddle this deal.
Okay. And you also want to be careful of any mechanics liens or anything else that's on that house that could end up, they could force a foreclosure and you could lose the property.
Yeah.
So basically the same kind of advice. Make sure you have your documentation and your contracts clearly written and everything delineated in there to protect both sides.
Yeah, and we also do what's called an NOC on owner finances. It's a notice of completion. Generally, it's only done on new build construction, but it's something that's filed that says, hey, everybody, listen, if you think that somebody that owns this property has a debt that you want, you need to come now and file it. Otherwise, it's gone. You got to take it up somewhere else. Can't do it against the real property. That's what the whole purpose is. On an owner's financing situation, we often do an NOC to say, if there's anybody out there that thinks they did work on this, come now and let me know. Because after we close, you can't file a lien on this property. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a good way of getting people to come forward. Or if they see it filed, they're like, oh, shit. I can't do anything, and they don't look into it, which is fine.
So on owner finance, I didn't even think about having title searches done, because it's typically what I've experienced or what I've run across is just, handshake deal, doing a little bit of paperwork, but having a title search, I didn't even think about that because you could get in a lot of trouble on the back end and risk your investment.
Same thing with sub twos. There's not always, not everyone does it closing for sub twos. That's your discretion. But if you're not going to do one, still pay for somebody to do a title search. Sometimes I do title searches for people, and like I work for an auctioneer. He has me do a title search. He doesn't want anything in writing. He just wants me to call him and say, there's no debt. And then he hangs up on me. Okay. Sometimes I call and I say there's 15 loans, and he goes, my God. And then he hangs up. So sometimes, that's all you want to know.
He just hangs up. Okay.
He just hangs up on me. Oh. But maybe that's all you want to know. If Matt called and said, Rose, please do a title search, let me know if the debt exceeds 150K. He may not care what's on the title. All he wants to know is, does the bottom line work? Yes or no?
Okay.
And I'll say, Matt, it's at 175K. Then he knows what he's going to do with that.
Okay. All right, good deal. Now, with the owner financing, the owner is typically keeping the deed in his name, his or her name.
Yeah,
So all the tax benefits are still going to the original seller, and the buyer is not getting any of those tax benefits until they actually have a deed transfer or have a loan taken out in their name.
A lot of owner finances, historically, they wanted to be on the deed if it was a private sale. So they'll add you to the deed.
Okay, so
I don't
just
like
a quick
that.
claim deed,
Yeah,
and
I
then
don't
both
like
of
that.
you are on there?
Yeah, I don't like that.
Why don't you like that?
Because then I have no way to get you off the deed. And now I got to divest you somehow. And now you're
Either party.
And now you're going to be a pain in my ass. Yeah, no, I don't like that.
Okay.
So I actually just was looking at a property on Davidson Street, and it was an owner finance deal. And he said, I'll just add you to my deed. No, sir. We will not be doing that. We're not joining in on deeds. No.
So you'd want him completely divested off that deed?
Yeah, he needs to deed it over to me, and I'll sign a mortgage for him.
Okay.
And that's his security. So sometimes it's just negotiating, educating, making sure you understand what your risk orientation is. And if something doesn't feel right, asking the questions and having teams of people around you to say, this
Hey.
is what I talked about, feels real funny.
Make sure it passed the smell test.
Yeah, does this pass the smell test for you? I'm like, oh, no.
If you got to ask, it probably doesn't.
Yeah. Add me to the deed. No, sir. No,
Okay.
sir. I'm not adding you to a deed.
So, with the owner financing, it seems like there's a little bit more risk there with that versus the subject to or the lease option. What would you think would be a good scenario for owner financing?
When there's no debt on the house and the owner is going to give you a killer interest rate.
Okay, so they own the property free and clear, and this goes commercial or residential. They own it free and clear, and they offer you some really good terms, 5-6% interest rate, whatever. They're going to finance it. That puts some. I could see the benefits to the seller as well. Now he's getting some cash flow every month, and you're getting a really good rate and term. You just got to make sure that the terms are everything is locked down on there. So once again, call Rosemary.
And great for the seller, because the sellers generally at that level don't want $500,000 cash. They don't have a desire
They
because
don't
the
want capital
taxes.
gains and all that.
So if they can smear it out, they love to do that. Most of them want 24 to 36 months, and that's fine. Then you just refi it. But at that point, you have a lot more equity for the refi.
Sure.
So if you call John or somebody else that's lending,
Nice
you
plug.
you don't generally have to put any money in for that refi because you have so much equity in the property already. It's a cash free thing.
Yeah, and if you've already got 25% equity compared to the value of the property, you won't have to put anything down. You just come in there, refinance it, and now you're done with the seller. Seller's got their money. So that's a really good option. I know Beth and I, we watch a lot of the tax sales, and you'll have people that have passed away and relatives inherit the property. They're many states away. They don't know what to do with it, but the house is owned free and clear. That might be a good option to call them up and say, hey, if you'll own or finance it, we can do this instead of them getting that big chunk of money up front. Then they've got to deal with the tax implications of that. So that's another great tool in the toolbox there if you're looking into those kinds of things. Anything else you want to talk about? Any other advice for would-be investors who are just getting started?
My advice always for new investors is build your toolbox, have your people, have your title person, have your lender people, have a mentor. Mentors are critical in real estate and investment, and not only to bounce ideas off of, but to save you from making critical mistakes. And I think that successful investors are happy to share that advice or steer you in the right direction. So build your toolbox and make sure it's solid. And those people you have really good relationships with where you can call. As example, like John could call me tomorrow morning at 7 and say, Rose, I'm in a spot. Whether I'm closing it or not, I would stop and look at the title for him and say, yes, I agree, that's a critical issue. Then that just gives him enough comfort to move forward on the deal or not.
Yeah, I will mirror her thoughts on that. There's a saying, your network is your net worth, and that is absolutely true in the world of real estate investing. And honestly, I mean, I've asked so many different people questions about things that I've come across, and I haven't had anybody shut me down. It is a very open community, and because there's plenty of deals. There's deals everywhere.
Yeah.
And if you network properly, you'll have some of your friends send you deals, because people get into these, what they call buy boxes, where this is where I'm comfortable buying, and these are the numbers, and the margins have to be here for me to buy this place. But it may not work for them, but it may work perfectly for Matt, or, for Beth, or for Rosemary. And so you'll end up having people call you and say, hey, I've got this property. It doesn't really fit in my buy box, but it sounds like something you might be interested in. And now you got a deal. And the next time you get one that's not really fitting you, they might, and then next thing you know, you're collaborating, you're sending each other deals, and it just works. I know I do that quite a bit. Because I'm a hard money lender and a regular lender, I'll have people call and say, hey, I know you financed this deal, but I'm getting ready to sell this property. Do you know anybody, before it goes on the market, do you know anybody who'd want it? And now I've got this network of investors. I can pump it out to them and get an off-market deal. And the only thing they got to do is call Rosemary to get it. I'll do the loan. She'll close it. Done. So it's really good to keep building your network. You can do it here with the 10 people that are here. Or, as we grow, it'll get a little better and a little bigger, and, make things happen and get you rich. We'll get on her level one day. But does anybody have any questions, or do you have a deal that you've looked at? Any questions at all? Yes, ma'am.
Rosemary, you have quite an extensive background in real estate and development and all of that. What is the most wild, because we are talking about creative financing, what's the most wild creative financing deal you've seen in your real estate development?
Like money-wise or complicated wise?
You can take a pick.
Yeah.
It's your choice.
I'm sure she wants to hear the complicated one.
Okay. You want to hear the complicated one? It's actually a deal I have right now, and it is by far the most complicated deal I've ever worked on in my life. And, okay, I can say this. It is a purchase of raw land, so fee simple purchase by a developer that has 10 simultaneous closings with it. So we will have one primary closing. It will close at 8 a.m. For the remainder of the day, we will close 10 additional portions of the primary. Those 10 additional will fund my first closing, and then the leftover revenue will be dispersed to the developer of the initial purchase.
Wow.
And to make it even more complicated, 3 of the 10 closings are government bond purchases. So they're backed government purchaser people so he's buying in fee simple. I've already carved it up. So now it's in 11 tracts. So he's going to buy the 11 tracts, and then we're going to deed and sell out 10 of them. 3 will go to the government city. And then the other one's to a multifamily builder, one's to a hotel, one's to a retail developer. Those guys are 90 minutes apart for the remainder part of the day. That one's real complicated.
That sounds a little complicated.
Yeah.
When you divided the tracts, did you have to do any rezonings for any of them? Or was it all?
Yeah, I did a mixed use rezone, so it was ag zoned, and then I replatted it into 10 tracts, and then did a multi-use rezone on it, so we could have C2 in the front, the exempt portion in the back, and then so we submitted the plat for a rezone approval. So that obviously was pretty complicated too, and getting the city to wrap their heads around how the rezoning fit in a master plan and that kind of stuff. Getting those deals to all align is a whole situation.
So if somebody's bringing a project like that, you'll handle the rezoning, you'll handle all of that in-house.
I can take anything from dirt to vertical multi-hundred apartment buildings. That's actually my expertise. I'm good at residential, but the bulk of my experience is moving raw dirt into vertical construction. So a lot in surveying, environmental, plats, rezones.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
Highest and best use. Well, that's why residential it's a lot easier for me to teach people residential, because I understand the foundational part of
Gotcha, okay.
real estate.
Awesome.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't have a lot
I'm leaning
to
more
talk
towards
about.
taking your word for that.
Yeah.
You can't say the name Rosemary around Clarksville. We know who that is. Yeah.
I try to be a good person too. Yeah.
You have a fantastic reputation in town.
Thanks.
Promise you that.
Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions or a deal they want to talk about? Yeah.
So I'm an agent wholesaler, right? Working for a firm.
Yeah.
We don't do this, but like we might be open to trying some other avenues. And there's some other people around town who wholesale stuff too. I'm not used to that. I've never done that. I've been a buyer. I've bought a ton of stuff just cash. How do you do that correctly?
The subject to?
Yeah. Yeah. Because there are people who do that.
You want to wholesale something subject to?
Complicated world. A whole lot of POAs. You know, it's like how do you do that correctly with like knots tied where?
My answer is I don't think that you can do it correctly. And I know the people that do those, and this is what I've told them when they've brought me those deals. Explain to me how you can not breach a fiduciary duty and a power of attorney when you are using your power of attorney to entitle yourself with money. That's the problem you get into. So I'm going to wholesale it, but I'm going to make money off of the deal that I already have, but I actually don't have any financial responsibility to that. And then I'm going to use the power of attorney to utilize your name through your banking system to entitle myself to a buyout. I don't think that cuts mustard.
You think that's going to fall into that predatory lane?
Yeah, or worse. I think that's really gray. I've heard people pitch it, and it may work. That's just my opinion. I don't know if it's over your head, to be honest. It may just not cut mustard. And when the sub 2, when you're already, I'm going to be Debbie Downer, you're already violating a due on sale clause. You've now taken property potentially violating Tennessee Foreclosure Protection Act. You've taken limited power of attorney to access somebody's financial portal and operate them as it relates to their real property. And then you're going to take all of those responsibilities, capitalize off of it, and then go give it to somebody else. I don't know that meets that. There might be a way to do it. I just haven't seen it done. I wouldn't be interested. Yeah. I mean, tell them if they want to pay their lawyer to paper all of it for you, I'll review it. They'll make sure they write it all.
Actually, I had one of the wholesaling companies. They put out an email probably a week or two ago pitching that very thing. I don't think it was yours though.
No, we don't do it.
I was going to say it was another company.
Figure out like what that market looks like, how that is, if it's worth maybe having a discussion internally with us. If it's not, we're not hurt. But like, if there's a market,
Might be a market, I don't know what company you're with, but might be a market in the regards to we will wholesale purchase that sub 2, but I'm going to go refi it next week. And I'm going to end the sub 2 scenario. If there's that much equity in it to where that makes sense for that play. But I think most of the people that are wholesaling those sub 2 deals, there's no meat on the bone, and that's why they want out of it, because they took it sub 2 thinking they had more meat, and they don't. So now they're just trying to offload it and tell you that you got $15,000 worth of equity. Well, that doesn't mean anything. Well, for us,
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't move the line.
That was a great question though, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather find out the answer now versus after you've done 10 of those deals and you find out it's not passing the smell test.
Yeah.
Now what do you do?
Yeah. And there might be somebody way smarter than me that can figure it out. I'm always open to hearing people and running it through like a legal contingency. So I think the biggest mistake people make in real estate is drawing lines in the sand. The day you say, I know it all, you're just kind of up Schitt's Creek. So if you're always open to say, I don't know how that works, but I'm open to hearing that maybe you have a better way of doing it. And that's kind of a meeting of the minds.
Gotcha. Anybody else have a question? Comment? 'Cause we covered a lot in a short period of time.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to call it early tonight.
Cool.
All right. Well,
Thank
thank you,
you.
ma'am. I really appreciate your time.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Nice to meet you.